All right, this is the November 8th, 2022 meeting of the Loaders team. Our agenda is really simple. It's just the two open PRs. One is about loaders that affect subsequent loaders, and the other is about moving user loaders off thread or into a worker thread. And that's it. I'm going to update the Google Doc. So yeah, sorry, Jacob, you were saying something about that the off-thread PR is stuck on a V8 issue.
Yes, things were chugging along quite nicely, and then V8 started saying that like part of V8 didn't exist, and I don't know V8 that well to figure out what the heck is going on. So I reached out to Anna, and she was on holiday at the time, and then she just got back to me yesterday and said that she pulled it down and it didn't reproduce, but I think she just didn't invoke ESM because it only is caused, or it's only triggered when ESM is triggered. So hopefully that is the thing, and then she can actually see it. But I see Antoine pushed a commit. Oh my god, it's enormous. Shit. Very recently.
I think he was just rebasing it on latest main, wasn't he?
Oh, maybe he didn't say. He is now 2 days ago. What the heck? He's now posting a different error that I've not seen before. So that makes me think that he was maybe able to get past this V8 error. Hold on, let me see if I can ping him real quick. Because we were not getting this error before. But yeah, that was the main blocker. We have a proof of concept. We know that this does work, aside from integrating it with Node. We know that the impact to Node startup is not trivial, but doesn't seem to be obviously a showstopper. And we know that the individual cost to an import is trivial. So we don't really need to consider the overhead of involving this once it is running. It adds like nanoseconds.
Going back to the non-trivial startup cost, though, is that all the time or only if user loaders are defined?
It's currently only if ESM is used. So if a user defines or sets a loader and ESM is not used, then the cost is not paid at all. But if as soon as ESM is invoked, it does spin up the loaders thread, and that is what.
But what if the app is ESM but there are no user loaders?
It will still spin it up because Node's default loaders go in it. So if we decide that if there are only Node's default loaders and we don't want to protect them, then we can say we don't spin it up.
I mean, I would think that there's no reason to protect Node's internals from Node's own loaders if there's no custom loaders involved, right?
It's to protect them from userland.
But the node code should already be protected from userland, right?
No, it's not.
Because we are already using
the primordials.
Yeah, yes, but we are using the array prototype concat or all those functions precisely to not be affected by the prototypes.
It's protected-ish. It's protected by humans, not by machines. So that means it's protected as much as we.
Yeah, like if anyone ever forgets to use the primordials, and there are a handful of primordials that like we can't apparently do that technique for, that like that technique doesn't work for certain things like symbols, or like there are like edge cases that where that technique doesn't work.
But that argument, protecting it, from others, that will probably be the same for any node code.
It's almost like a separate concern where like it's something we've been batting around for a while of like maybe we should just run user code in its own thread full stop, and like have the internals be separate regardless of anything to do with loaders, and then it's like internals are just isolated from user, or rather the other way around, user code is isolated from internals. And that could be like its own improvement that we do whenever. I'm not even sure that would be a breaking change. It might have effects on like multi-patching and stuff though.
I'm going the other way. I mean, if we're not doing it for all node code, why would we do it for the built-in loaders? The cost of spinning a thread, it's not a thread, it's almost a process, because you're spinning up basically a separate V8 instance for all ESM apps. That's not trivial.
Yeah.
I would argue against. Again, it's not my say here, but as an avid ESM user, I would not be happy to sustain that cost on every process that uses ESM, which is all of mine.
I would tend to agree. Although I also think that it's a problem if it's too slow when loaders are used, because for instance with yarn PNP, we are always going to have a loader when running scripts, so it will always be slower. But at the same time, it doesn't seem something that should block the initial implementation. It can be iterated over time if it's truly an issue. But
sorry, what? It can be iterated on a timer?
Over time.
Over time, yeah.
Oh.
Basically, it's not a problem if the initial implementation is a little bit slow, if it can be improved in follow-up iterations.
The off-threading or the ambient loader stuff?
The off-threading. Specifically making the built-in making the cost of not using when not using loaders be zero. I think that was specifically what was meant.
So this was linked from the issue. So the PR for moving loaders off thread, it has a accompanying issue of like, this is what we want to do. And then there was a much older comment that Bradley wrote here with all of like the pros and cons of like basically why to do this. Like Bradley was the champion of moving loaders off thread, and these are the arguments for why.
I'm all for moving the loaders off thread. I'm arguing that the node loaders, the built-in loaders, shouldn't be off thread. Because
I feel like I don't know what benefit we get from doing that other than the prototype pollution thing, which, like, sure, maybe that's something like that could be maybe something we address like on its own, like, and we would want to address that for CommonJS too, because what good does it do to isolate the ESM code but not the CommonJS code, right?
Exactly.
Well, but then that brings it into, I guess, question your proposal of moving userland to a separate code, to a separate thread, because if we do that, then
that's a whole different scope. That is a whole different scope.
No, I know that, but what I'm saying is that will address all of these things.
Yes, but I don't know. This is not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is the non-zero cost of using ESM if this PR lands as it is.
I understand, but what I mean is maybe we are solving the wrong problem. So if we want to get this to affect CommonJS and ESM, and we are also somehow able to reduce the cost of spinning up this thread, then maybe it is in fact just better to abandon off-threading ESM loaders and instead off-thread user code.
One, I don't think we can minimize the cost of sending a thread. Anna, even back in the days when she worked on threads, she says it's basically a process. It's basically spinning up another V8 instance. So I don't see how we can do that. And what you're saying is now the cost is not only for ESM, it's for everything. And that's not something I wouldn't necessarily want. I mean, what is the real problem that this is trying to solve? I'm not really sure. All I was saying is ESM loaders off thread is great, but let's not do the node original loaders off thread, because that would add a non-zero cost to regular ESM apps.
Okay.
I think, I mean, look, just hold on for a second. I think like reading what Bradley was originally proposing, I don't think he had in mind moving the node internal loaders off thread, unless I'm misreading this somehow. I mean, I know this is like, you know, added challenge for the PR, but like, if we can refactor the PR such that only the custom user loaders go off thread, but the node internal stays on thread, or at least the node ones go off thread only if there are custom user ones defined. So then like all the loaders would be off thread, but only if you've opted into using custom loaders. I think that would probably be okay too. But then like in the default case where there are no user loaders supplied, node loaders stay on the main thread. Like if we can land that version of the PR, I think that would resolve Mateo's concern about performance.
Yeah. I'm not sure that would be possible though, because it's a bit hard to reason, but I think that the default loader will probably, I don't remember exactly how we decided that we should be able to hook into the resolution algorithm from the core resolution. Because, for instance, there was the zip loader, which allows retrieving package from zip archives transparently. And in order to do that, it needs to access the file system using some primitive that can read from zip archives.
But this is already not the default node loader scenario. You've added PNP.
So this would be inside a zip loader and not by providing hooks to the default loader, right?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Like if you're using this zip loader, then you're already not in the default scenario. So you already pay the cost of spinning up the thread. According to what
I mean, I think like
considering now.
I think we've never claimed that user loaders don't come with a performance hit. Like if you're like transpiling TypeScript on the fly and things like that, you have opted into a performance hit, like by definition. It's even for like the one that I can think of likely production case that they're going to attach instrumentation library like Datadog or New Relic or something like that. People know that that's heavy in terms of memory and so on, because it's like watching every network request and file access and so on. So like they understand like that's expected that has like a big performance cost. So I don't think we're trying, I mean, it'd be nice. Obviously we want user loaders to be as fast as they can be, but I don't think we're trying necessarily to, you know, we're erring much more on the side of max functionality for loaders when they're engaged over performance concerns. But I think the pressure we're getting from others is that when loaders aren't specified, ideally there would be no performance hit from this PR.
And one thing also, so what you're saying is that when loaders are used, then it should incur a performance cost.
If there is one to pay.
Yes, but for instance,
I mean, obviously, if we can minimize it, that would be
always be
preferable. But
so,
you know,
what I'm wondering is that isn't it kind of shouldn't it be opt-in? kind of like the policies that already exist, the security policies that already exist in Node. In order to enable them, you have to set the
You
right
mean
flags.
opt in to running loaders in an isolated thread versus not?
Yeah.
I think that would be too difficult. Like, I think the average user wouldn't understand what the consequences of that are, and then like loader authors would.
But would
Like
the average user care about moving the loaders off thread?
Well, they would care when they start getting crazy behavior.
I think like loader authors would write it with one set of expectations or the other. Like it would be hard to write a loader that could behave in both scenarios. So we don't want like this to be a user defined option that like now loader authors need to handle both of the ways that their loader could be engaged, you know?
Why would it be so different? Loaders are already supposed to be kind of shielded from the outside world. So if you write a
Supposed
loader
to be,
that is
but
supposed to
only
work,
in as much as they agree to not be naughty.
yes, but that's the same for all GS code.
But
Yeah, but
if
like
it's not thread, then there is no agreement. There is
the
this
loaders
is
monkey patch
loader.
all the time. You know what I mean? Like the Node.js loaders, like by definition, are monkey patching things pretty much.
Because
And so,
we have no choice.
well, sure. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be doing so, but like ESM loaders could also monkey patch while they're engaged. And I think that moving them off thread would block that ability.
And why would we want to block that if they need to do it?
Because then nobody knows what's going on.
Then someone who wants to know what's going on could just enable the policy.
Wait.
this
I'm sorry, but once you have a flag, then why move loaders off thread? I mean, there's a whole argument in Bradley's thing about moving loaders off thread, and it was already decided. I mean, this is a huge PR. It was already decided to move loaders off thread, saying
was that it was for security. And security I mean, not all scripts need to be shielded from loaders. So
but
if we have to
it's
put a
asking
cost,
a lot of the end user. So like it kind of goes against the principle of least knowledge. Like they are suddenly required to know a lot of very esoteric information to do something that should be more or less plug and play.
Isn't it already the case for the node policies?
No, it's like you specify a flag, like you add the loader and you're good to go. It's like
no, but I mean, Node has a policy feature in such a way that you cannot access the file system, you cannot make requests, this kind of thing. And in order to enable it, you have to provide a file that defines the policy that you want to enable on the application, on the running application.
I would say that's arguably a much more sophisticated feature. Like this is kind of, I want to load some CSS files, so I plug in this CSS loader. Like I don't really have to think about what it's doing. But then if we add a flag to say like off thread these, and this particular loader does naughty things or depends on other things not doing naughty things, then you suddenly need to know a lot more about what's going on than merely plugging something in.
There is one other kind of big pro that Bradley mentions that we haven't discussed, which is doing CPU heavy work in a loader doesn't block the application or other loaders.
Yes.
There we go.
And I feel like that's very relevant for something like the TypeScript loader. Like, you know, these loaders that essentially move build tools to be running at runtime, whether it's transpiling TypeScript or JSX or whatever else, like, you know, a file here and there is quick, but when it gets to thousands, which happens pretty damn often, the time really adds up. So,
but wait a second, if we're using atomics to make these operations synchronous, then doesn't that throw that out the window?
I don't know, does it?
Another problem is that since there is a single thread for the loaders, if there is a CPU intensive task on the loader thread, since all the requests for resolution will reach the loader thread at the same time, it will still take a lot of time to resolve them all because it will still be stuck there.
Wait,
To
it
solve
won't reach
that,
them
the
all at the same time.
TypeScript, sorry?
It won't reach them all at the same time. It will reach them in series, sometimes in parallel, but well, never technically in parallel. Like
So
there will be
it will still be slow to load a TypeScript application if we assume that TypeScript will take a lot of time to will be CPU intensive. It will still block.
it will still block, but the after the thread is spun up, the additional overhead of running the loaders in this off thread is virtually non-existent.
No, but I mean, what I think Jafar was saying is that if we have the loaders that are off thread, then CPU intensive tasks don't affect the application code. However,
I mean, I think this is like after the application has already started up. Like
Yes, but
if the code to run the
it's a-
application is coming in through the loaders, then it's all gonna have to wait. But like, say you've started a server and then, 1 minute after it started running, something gets imported and it goes through a loader.
that
No.
depends on something being imported after the fact.
It's
not the main
relevant only for a way. It's only relevant basically for a dynamic import.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah, I agree.
But
I mean-
you won't pay realistically any additional overhead.
No,
from-
the question here is not the overhead. There was a saying that somebody said that the benefit of offloading to a worker is performance. But if this performance is only for await import, and even there it's minimal, that's not a lot of benefit.
But I think that is outdated because I think that was assuming that we were not using atomics to block. And I can't see why off, because I assume the rationale behind the performance boost was that workers are asynchronous, but we are forcing them with atomics to be synchronous. So nothing is actually
Okay, so then it's at best, it's the same then as if
Yeah.
it weren't off thread. The
I
other
think-
thing that this does enable to us is that it allows us to match the browser spec for import.metadata resolve, which they
Yes.
defined as sync. So we have to choose between either using atomics to make our resolve hooks become fake sync, like appear to be synced to the user code, or we have to do a breaking change in our resolve hooks and actually make them sync, which we actually landed a PR that did that a while back and then reverted it as we started going down the road of this approach, when we realized that like, oh, hey, the threading and atomics thing should be allow us to provide a sync import.metadata resolve without needing to make the loader resolve hooks.
And that's the only way to make the resolve sync.
No, we achieved it without this, a different way.
We did.
But yeah,
How?
in the previous pull request, I forget what I did. But
no, we just changed the spec. Like we required our own resolve hooks to be sync. The node's internal one is sync, so it wasn't a change for node itself, but it meant that going forward, all user loaders would have had to define a sync resolve hook instead of the current spec, which allows them to define it as async.
Yeah, not good. And I want the resolve to be async. Well, that's a good argument for work.
I mean, I think at this point, like we were heading down. I mean, like you can always argue it's not worth. Like it's always subjective to be like, oh, it's not worth whatever cost, whether that cost is performance or security or whatever. We could like go back to Bradley's long list and like update it once we actually have the PR working, and then like make the judgment. I think it's a lot. I think like if at all possible, we should try to make there be little to no performance cost when no user loaders are specified. That'll just make this easy to land, at least in terms of like people like Mateo and the general group. I don't know if, I don't think that addresses all of Mail's concerns in fairness. But then it becomes more of a, like, you know, a nitty gritty, like we'll have to like write down the list of pros and cons and maybe do some like actual performance measurements. Because we're just kind of assuming that these things are like big hits, but maybe they aren't, or, you know.
Well, in terms of startup, I think probably the best that we will see if it is a JavaScript implementation is an additional 0.8 of a second to startup, which is not awful, but it's slightly noticeable.
Or no, it's almost 1 second.
That's
Almost.
very noticeable. I mean, when
Yeah,
regular node
it's-
starts
it's-
up in like 0.1 seconds, that's a big hit.
No, I think it's more than that, isn't it?
I don't know. I
Think
that's what I thought it
all-
used to be.
Probably, think of all the CLIs. They don't run in like, they run very quickly.
Oh, no, Node doesn't run very quickly CLIs.
At
We
least
are
the brand.
running in Yarn. We often are in the situation where we need to run a node process inside another node process inside another node process, and it can add like something like 3 seconds just to boot all those node process in a row,
Okay.
which is compounded by other programs in Node. But yeah,
Maybe
that-
I think the 100 milliseconds
Okay.
I'm thinking of is like AWS Lambda, but it already has a node process running when it launches your code. So that's
Yeah.
like, maybe that's like forking a process from a node process or something is 100 milliseconds. I don't know. So
Hmm.
maybe that's not a fair comparison.
what you said about making resolve sync in userland code, I think that makes sense. And so, yeah, I forgot about this use case, but with that, it
Well,
makes
it's
sense.
not on Bradley's list because Bradley's it's just like 2
But
years old.
If
But
we
yeah,
do want to make import meta resolve sync, then we have to incur this cost regardless of whether there are custom loaders, because Node's default loader would also be involved, and it is async.
no, but Node's default is sync. So like, if there are no user loaders loaded,
No, it's async.
It's async.
no, Node's resolve is sync.
The internal
The
one.
common GS
The
one, but
internal one,
the
the
common GS
internal
one,
one, huh?
only the common GS one, the ESM one is async, right?
Like when you
It
like
should.
when you write a loader and then next pulls in the like resolve from Node, like you've written the only loader in the chain, say, and next is the resolve from Node. That's actually a sync function that you're pulling in. You don't have to actually await it.
But when it reads a file, does it use read sync?
Load is async. Resolve is sync.
And it uses stat, so it uses stat sync.
No, import.metadata resolve doesn't load the file. It just resolves the URL. Like Node's internal resolve is sync.
So it
right,
uses
because it
that
doesn't
sync.
resolve the extensions and all that, right?
I'm sorry?
No, it
Because it
is not
doesn't resolve
async.
the extension.
No, I'm
or
not talking
the-
about CommonJS resolve.
Yeah, Node's built-in resolve, at the very least, it has the keyword async at the beginning.
No, but
But
wait,
it's not sync though. Like, so
because-
a few months ago when we like when we changed the ESM loaders resolve hook to be synced in order
Mhm.
to achieve import.meta sync import meta resolve. The reason that this was like fairly easy to do was because Node's internal resolve hook is already a synchronous function. You know,
That
maybe it has
is-
the async keyword on it, but it doesn't do anything async in there. You could just make it a sync function.
That is quite possibly true. All I know from a quick glance at the file is that it is currently technically async.
I think
Uh-huh.
it's defined as an async function just so that like the signature when it's passed in to the loader's chain
Oh,
matches
possible.
the expected, like it's supposed to be an async function. But like if user loaders didn't exist, it wouldn't have the async keyword there. It is just a sync function.
Okay.
But
Actually,
So
yeah,
anyway,
all of the FS
if
things,
load, if
they are
there are
all
no
the same.
user loaders defined, there's no there's no other loaders thread. All the
No.
node loader stuff happens on the main thread. Import.metadata resolve sync would map to the node internal resolve sync, and we're good. You know,
But
we
it still makes a request to the file system, which are currently sync. Indeed, in the code, it is sync, but in ESM, it should be async. Since we can load multiple things in parallel, it would be faster if we were able to make the file system calls async in parallel. So
tell you, it's it's not currently async, and the browsers decided that for whatever reason the browsers decided that resolve should be sync.
No, I don't mean about the browsers, but in Node, for instance, in order to make the resolution, we need to read the exports field in the packet.json, which means that we need to make file system calls in order to know how to resolve the files. So right now, the implementation is using the CommonJS implementation, which is
I think
sync.
historically all of those file system calls have all been sync calls.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes,
they
because
certainly
of
have been in
CommonJS.
CommonJS,
My,
and
my,
I
my
think
point is
ESM just
more.
inherits that.
My point is more that in ESM land, we could do better. So perhaps we shouldn't assume that we can just assume that the ESM loader will always be sync, if that makes sense.
If that's the case, though, then then we'll have the same problem as user loaders do, where in order to somehow still honor a sync import meta resolve, we'll need to put some kind of atomics.wait or some kind of like wrapper around node's internal resolve. Or we decide to break spec and import.meta resolve happens to return a promise in node, but that's like the worst of all outcomes.
No, I don't think we should break spec, and it's just that in putting special logic to the default node loader, because it happens to not be leveraging all the strength of ESM, that doesn't seem a huge gain.
I mean, I think people measured it, and it's actually faster to just do file system calls sync than async, even though it seems to defy common logic. Like people have done those measurements, and like read file sync is much faster than like read file with a callback or read file that returns a promise.
How? Is it just because it's so fast that the promise overhead is only overhead?
I don't know. I didn't
Oh,
do
okay.
the study. You could, someone did this research not too long ago. I think like when we were implementing FS/promises or something like that. Like this has come up before and people have like looked into it. But look,
okay.
you know, I feel like that's yet another like concern. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, if we want to someday do that, we can. Like, I feel like there's nothing blocking us from landing off thread just for user loaders. And then if we also want to move the ESM loader off thread, that could be a follow-up PR. If we also want to make file system calls async as part of loading, that could be another PR. You know, like these are all things we can, you know, tack on. I don't think that this first PR blocks any of these ideas, does it?
Yeah, I'm welcome.
Well, actually, Gil, I have a question for you.
Yes.
And if we have a loaders thread spun up for each userland thread, so we have
Yes.
the main quote unquote userland thread that happens just by default, and then we a userland userland spawns its own thread, and then we spawn a separate loaders thread, and possibly affected by ambient loaders, which are affecting other loaders. Any loader that is stateful now has sort of a split mind, where they have no means to communicate across loader threads unless we specifically facilitate that. I'm thinking
um,
this might cause problems, but I
yes,
don't
I
know
have.
specifically why.
I'm not sure stateful is the right word. It's loaders that have an API that is userland and that is used to communicate with the loader itself. For
Mm.
example, test double, where you mock something, there's the userland API which says mock this module and give it this, and the loader that needs to implement it. So there's communication between userland and the loader thread, and it's using. I implemented it like I while waiting for this PR, I understood it was implemented using a simple object, but then offloading the work to a thread, I had to implement it using the channel port, whatever stuff that you gave me, and it worked. But now, if I have two worker threads that have like my loader, then I don't know how to do that.
Well,
I mean,
I think it is possible to give the same message channel to all of the threads. So
yes,
if
but the communication has already happened. So let's say I spawn I don't spawn anything yet. I don't spawn a userland thread, and I say mock this module and return this. Okay, so that information passes over to the loader thread, right? Now I spawn another userland thread. Now I have no way, that communication has already happened. I have
Yes.
no way of telling for the userland API to tell the new thread, hey, you know, there are some mocks that you need to know about.
Yes.
What I would prefer is to have all userland threads use the same loaders in that same worker thread. So have only one worker thread for module loaders for all the userland threads.
Yes.
I think that's how you have it, isn't it, Jacob?
Hmm?
Isn't that how you have it now?
Well, only as the simplistic implementation, and then we were going to add this extra layer of complexity onto it.
No. This will kill any loader thread that has an API that is used in userland.
I forget who suggested it. Maybe Taros. I don't know what his real name is. Michael something. He's
Michael Lasso.
Austrian. Yeah. He was
Mikhail.
suggesting that this would be another flag. So users would either opt into it or opt out of it. But I think leaving that up to users, if, for instance, like test double or something is asking too much, and then you'll just have craziness.
Yep.
I feel like I don't see the real need to isolate loaders from other loaders.
Yeah.
We're already expecting them to be communicating with each
Like,
other through chaining, so.
Well, the rationale was that
we're not a okay. Sorry.
The rationale was that threads are intentionally isolated. So if a user is spawning up a separate thread, the understanding there is that that thread is isolated. But if behind the scenes, it is using the same loaders thread, which is potentially stateful, then they may fall into a pit.
But
I
that
would
would be
think that each new worker thread that the user code spawns would get a new loader thread.
Yeah, that's
But
what
not that each loader is isolated from each other in separate threads. Like if you load 4 loaders, you don't have 4 loader threads.
No, you wouldn't.
That make initial post, one of the advantage was to use the same loader thread in order to make the resolution in all the workers from the userland. So to be able to reuse the loaders. But honestly, I don't see a problem with sharing them between threads. I mean, yes, it makes a communication device if users decide to use it like this, but
well, let's say I have, so in my userland,
I don't want us to run out of time. we have one question we need to resolve, which was the subsequent loaders PR. Do you mind if we cut to that and then we can come back to this?
Sure.
Should we just land mails loaders affecting subsequent loaders PR? And then, yeah, you'll have to rebase Jacob, but you know, maybe that's not so bad at this point with where you're at.
Well, I mean, I
Or-
don't mind the effort of rebasing. My concern is just I haven't read through your pull request recently. I don't know if you've made any changes to
Well,
it.
let's re-review it, sure. And
Yeah.
I guess Mail, do you mind rebasing it off latest main? Because it's probably been a while.
Sure.
So make sure that it's maybe how this. Why don't first you rebase it off latest main, ping the rest of us that we should re-review it. We'll take a look at it, and then Jacob, if you think it's okay, it's not gonna like interfere with anything that you're trying to do on the other branch, we can just land it.
Okay.
And then I think at least for a couple weeks, if I can I'll put the don't release flags on it so that it'll stay on main, but it won't go out in any releases. Until
19.
even on 19, yeah, because we'd have to release the breaking change, all that notification and so on. I was thinking maybe at least until say like end of November or maybe even end of December. And then if the off thread PR is still blocked and can't land by then we'll just be like, all right, fine, we'll release it. And then we'll just have like 2 breaking changes, essentially one after another.
I mean, my PR is not really a breaking change. It fixed something that doesn't work, so
Yeah.
Well, it kind of changes the state of the world. And something that was working before can suddenly stop working.
how?
I mean,
How?
like something that
How?
like, yeah, someone writing a loader in TypeScript didn't work before and now will work. But like,
Yeah.
say that this,
Yeah,
like,
that will happen. That may happen by
That's a
right,
good
chance.
thing,
but like,
but no.
but say that there's a loader that like mocks things.
Yeah.
So now, like, if a subsequent loader imports FS, but the first loader has defined a mock for FS or something like that, now that's going to be different, where it's like the mock will exist in the following loader where it didn't before, and so that might break some expected behavior of the second loader.
This is
I mean, maybe this is really
so-
obscure, but that's why I was assuming it was a breaking change.
Yeah, same.
If you think it's too obscure, then maybe it's not worth bothering about. But if it's also, I was also thinking there's not like a hurry for this to get out in the world. So that if we release them both together, then we get more of an impact in like announcing that this stuff is available, you know?
This situation happened inside the node test, which we are doing a mock like you were mentioning. But outside of the node test, I don't see someone doing that, especially since the loaders are still very experimental. I haven't seen them a lot in the wild.
I mean, that maybe what we could do, you could just land it on main, you can release on 19, and we'll at least hold it back from 18 and below until the other one lands, at least for a little while, like maybe
Yeah.
end of December or something like that.
Yep.
Because I think like these are the last 2 PRs before loaders go stable. You know, like they're gonna have to live out there in the wild for a while and people discover bugs and stuff, but you know, there's nothing else on our roadmap other than bug fixes from these PRs that prevent us from calling loaders stable. So it's a bit of a like a PR push to get this out.
Public
Because then this is like the
relations,
last, like loaders going stable then means that like ESM is finished essentially, that like this was the last big or the last blocker for, you know, people using ESM in production supposedly. So
That's also one of the reasons why we can't wait until this PR can land, because if we notice something that is still a problem, we will need some time to think about potentially a solution, and the sooner it can land, the more time we have.
Okay, so then let's just, I think we've got a solution then. Let us know when it's ready for review. I think we already reviewed it and said it was fine. So I think we'll do the same again, most likely. We'll land it, it'll release on 19, and we'll just wait a little bit before releasing it on 18.
Sounds
That
good.
sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Are there any other questions we need to answer or decisions we need to make while we're here before we go back to the other?
I do have one quick question. Did we decide to change our team name?
Yeah, but I haven't given that any thought.
Okay.
Yes, it was whatever was on that thread. I think customization team, and
Yeah.
then that will, maybe we could do that all at the same time. When we get these two PRs out, things go stable. Loaders team becomes customization team. We'll move the loaders docs onto the customization page on the docs and all that stuff.
Okay.
But
Cool.
yeah, it's a lot of busy work, like renaming repos and things like that. So we can deal with that when maybe let's land these two PRs, and then that'll be like the very next priority.
Okay. Cool.
And then yeah, Mael, I think you were the one, right, who had that list of like all the other things that they wanted to be able to customize, like the REPL and so on.
No, that wasn't me. That was cspot code, which is
right.
a TS node.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, those are all worth doing for sure. So,
but I have
mean,
also my list of customization for things that I might want.
I mean, that's not waiting on any of this stuff. If you want to get started on those other APIs, you can go right ahead. Like, I don't think loaders being off thread is like a prerequisite for whatever, customizing source maps or whatever the other things are. So.
Okay, cool.
All right. I'm gonna write this up.
Back to multi-loaders thread things.
So let me make a point. Making if we want like things like mock APIs to work, we have to either do one worker thread for all loaders, never mind how many userland threads we have, or we need to implement some additional API that helps us communicate between the loaders, between the worker threads loaders, and some kind of hook which tells a loader, hey, there are some other loaders that just were created just like you, want to pass them some information, or some weird stuff like that. I would go for today, just have one worker thread with all the loaders, no matter how many userland threads are, and maybe in the future, if we decide to go all wacky with loaders, like implement the additional APIs needed.
Okay, would that be hugely disruptive if we added it later?
Added what later?
So if we have the one true worker loaders worker, and then we subsequently decided to spawn one worker per userland thread.
That would have to come with additional API.
Yeah, sure.
And would break loader threads. Would break loaders.
That's what I mean. So I imagine this would be a breaking change, but like how disruptive would it be, and would it be an opt-in or an opt-out? Or worry about that problem another time?
I would worry about the problem another time. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
because
this all makes
now implementing an API and thinking about it and what's the best way. I mean, that's a big work. That's a lot of work.
Okay, so then it sounds like for now, do the one true loaders thread and add some caveat to the workers thread docs to say that they share a loader thread, which
Yes.
may be contrary to what users might expect, but this is how it
Sounds
is, at least for now.
Sounds perfect.
Okay, and then, yeah, maybe we can, I don't know, add a configuration option to the options of worker threads or whatever, and say like isolate loaders or something.
One day.
Okay, cool. Great, that makes it easier. I just have to figure out this / figure out someone who knows how to figure out this V8 issue.
Gil, do you know any C++ or V8 stuff?
My C++ days are gone.
I was gonna ask Mail before you left. I missed it.
Mhm.
Missed my chance. Well, if you know anyone who can help in that, I mean, maybe we've already got it between Anna and Antoine, but that's been like the main blocker, I think, on this
Does
PR.
Antoine know V8 like intimately?
No, no, I don't think so. But I think he knows a little C++.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay.
Gil, I
well,
have one question for you. Do we have
Yeah.
is there a, speaking of V8, I think there's still no way to unload a module from V8 as far as I'm aware. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So is the best way to do hot module reload still with the cache busting on the query string?
Yep.
There's no better or other method at the moment.
It's currently the only one.
should we
Good to know.
ask the V8 team to do this?
I mean,
Or
I
have
feel
we
like we've
already done it?
asked for you. I mean, we can always ask again. I feel like they don't treat it as a priority because it's like not needed by browsers, although people want to do hot module reload in browsers too. So
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know.
I think it's less of a real problem than what people, I mean, it's not
It's
a
a
real
stupid problem, I feel like. It's just something
Yeah.
that comes up when people complain about
Exactly.
migrating to ESM. Oh, but I can't clear the cache like CommonJS.
Yeah.
Like I ran into it at work recently where like there's an actual production app that clears the require cache like in production. It's like wild. And I'm talking to them about migrating it to ESM, and it's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do with this? You know, it's like, oh, you can re-implement using query string things, but you know, having it leak memory is kind of okay in dev, but not so much okay in prod. So yeah. So
Would-
yeah, it was a thing.
Like, at least on the surface, it sounds like implementing that in V8 shouldn't be that hard. I mean, I say this knowing absolutely nothing about V8, but like conceptually, it seems like it's just like a clear or like specifically deleting an entry.
I think it's that like there are those phases in ESM where it's like the parsing, the linking, and the evaluation.
Mhm.
And the linking phase, it's like if you delete a module from V8's cache, then you have to like update all the other modules that are linking to it. And
Mhm.
what are those? Those would have like if say you have a module that has an export named foo, and some other module imports foo. Well, now you delete that module. Delete the module that exported foo. What's supposed to happen to the other modules that have imported foo?
It should be gone.
Yeah, but that's
But-
not how
but
ESM
there's
works.
a link. Yeah, you have a dangling pointer in some ways.
Mm.
Because
So I think that's the. I
when you
mean,
import
not to
when you
not to say that it's unresolvable, but I think that's the problem. Is like, how do you handle that case?
good point.
Hmm.
Yeah, good,
Okay.
good point.
So yeah, I'm sure they could figure something out, but it's like, yeah, they would have to. I think it's not so much a remove API as it is a replace API. Like there should be some way to replace a module that's already loaded into the cache. And as long as you're not changing its external signature, like it still exports the same things, they have the same names, then maybe we can replace one with another, because that's just replacing parsed code with other parsed code. But even then, it's like if that foo is imported somewhere else and somebody mutates it or something like that, is that shared? Are you preserving that shared state somehow? You know, it just gets so messy.
Good point.
So I don't know. I don't know the answer. Maybe I think this is probably why though that's been,
Kick down
kick
the
the
road.
can down the road for so long. I would be curious to see if what's the other major one? JavaScript core, the one that or SpiderMonkey or whatever the other JavaScript
Oh, yeah,
runtimes
SpiderMonkey.
besides V8. I wonder if either of them have this feature, because if they did, then at least like, okay, A, there's precedent, B, you could look to see how they handle this problem, So
Are we gonna like threaten V8 to leave them and go to SpiderMonkey?
yeah, good luck. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah, I think we can keep muddling through for now, but yeah, we're at the point where it's like, we're getting down to the odds and ends of like, what can people do in CommonJS that they can't do in ESM? And that's one of them, instrumentation is probably the biggest one because that's actually a production concern, but all the rest of these are mostly dev concerns that, may or may not get resolved or that we care about, but the list is growing short, fortunately.
Cool. Well, on a gratifying note, I use or I have been using loaders quite extensively in my own projects for like dev work and stuff, and it is amazing. Oh my god, it's so fast and it's so convenient. So
Awesome.
congrats, team.
Well, let us know when they're used in production at work, like for instrumenting a production ESM app or something, because I think that's the milestone. Like, someone needs to be running a big public app with that tech stack, and we make it public, and then it's like, okay, now we can use this.
Well, you're not supposed to use loaders in production, but the rest of it, yes.
You're gonna have to for instrumentation.
For APM, yeah.
I thought that was going to use diagnostics channel.
I think it's gonna use both. Like they can't,
Oh.
their diagnostic channel doesn't cover enough. They want to, they're still gonna need to like monkey patch lots of modules like they do now in order to get the metrics that they currently provide.
Oh,
Otherwise,
okay.
it's a cat and mouse game of getting every module like Express, say, needs to be updated to use diagnostics channel. And even if that's done, it's like, well, then now like you're going to tell all these apps to like upgrade to the latest version of Express for some 4-year-old app, or you know what I mean? Like,
Well,
they
Express
can't
is dead, so
really.
that's definitely not happening.
Well, but that's just an
Um,
example.
So,
I don't think
I'm
it's
sorry, I
quite dead.
have to drop off.
Oh,
But
okay.
anyway, that's the thing. They're gonna use
I go.
like
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
monkey patching of imported modules for that reason, that like it's asking the whole world to refactor for the purposes of instrumentation is just not like
Gonna happen.
realistic. So
Yes.
I think they'll use diagnostic panel when present for all the modules that support it, and they'll skip monkey patching for any modules that support diagnostics channel, and they'll get better performance for that. And like, they'll probably try to encourage their users to pick those modules that support diagnostics channel, etc. But they got to sell a product. Product's got to work on what
Yes.
users are using. So
True. Okay, cool. Well,
let me know if you. It sounds like maybe there's progress on the branch. So let me know if you get stuck, and if you can post, repro steps that I can follow, then I'm happy to take a look. If it's something related to V8 or C++, I'm almost sure they're not going to be able to fix it. But at least if you post it there and tag at Node.js/CPP, hopefully someone on that, on the C++ side might, there's also I think a Node.js/V8 group too you could tag. So
oh shit, I didn't know about that. Okay. Yeah, the reproduction.
there should be
part-
people that can get you past these blockers, is my point. So
Oh, okay, yeah. The
we just have
reproduction
to
part is
we just have to
crazy
make it a
simple.
little more public and more reproducible, and then hopefully we can get all this stuff resolved.
Oh, yeah, it's super reproducible. It's just like node input type module -e import something, and then you can watch it explode.
Well, let me know how far you get if you get blocked, and then
Okay.
we can do that. That sounds good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ciao.
See ya.